Good morning. My name is Ellie Beaver, and I'm the Government Relations Director for the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network here in Minnesota. We're here today to thank Governor Dayton for declaring this week, December 2nd through 9th, 2017, Cancer Screen Week in Minnesota. Screening gives you the best chance of finding cancer as early as possible, while it's small and before it's spread. Screening tests can even prevent cancer, such as a colonoscopy to look for colon cancer, which can detect precancerous polyps and remove them before they have a chance to turn into cancer. Screening tests can also relieve anxiety in a time when information overload can make us worry that we are experiencing symptoms that we found on the internet. We all love to get the news that we're all right. The American Cancer Society recommends that patients talk to their primary healthcare provider about which screening tests are right for you based on your personal and family health history. Today you will hear from cancer survivors who got the screening tests they needed, which found their cancer early, and now they are here with us today. You will also hear from a medical professional who sees patients every day and helps to connect them with the screening tests they need, like pap smears to detect cervical cancer, mammography to detect breast cancer, and colonoscopy to detect colon cancer. I'm grateful to the Minnesota Legislature and Governor Dayton for recognizing the importance of cancer screening and have made it easier for Minnesotans to get the cancer screenings they need through policies like the SAGE program, which screens uninsured women for breast and cervical cancer, and expanding access to health care through programs like Minnesota Care and medical assistance. I would also like to recognize and thank the cancer-fighting organizations represented in the room today: the Susan G. Komen Foundation, the Colon Cancer Coalition, Zero Prostate Cancer, the Minnesota Prostate Cancer Coalition, A Breath of Hope Lung Cancer Foundation, the American Indian Cancer Foundation, and Health Partners Park Nicollet. All of us and many other organizations across the state work every day to eliminate the burden of cancer in Minnesota. For more information on cancer screening tests and how to reduce your risk of cancer, you can visit the American Cancer Society's website at cancer.org. And to learn more about Cancer Screen Week and to take a pledge to get screened, go to www.cancerscreenweek.org. Now I'd like to introduce Senator Susan Kent, who represents Woodbury in the Minnesota State Senate and who is a 3-year breast cancer survivor, to tell her story.
Just, everybody who's standing pinned in the back there, you're welcome to take the chairs up here. You can ask me easy questions as members of the press. I appreciate that, but please fill the seats and be part of this. Great. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm State Senator Susan Kent, and I am deeply honored to be here today to share my personal support for Governor Dayton's proclamation of Cancer Screen Week. It's been a gift for me to work with the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network for several years on policies that help with the prevention and treatment of cancer. Through this partnership, I gained tremendous appreciation and admiration for all the survivors, families, and friends who are part of this fight. Everything I thought I knew about cancer changed in December 2015, when I received my diagnosis of invasive lobular carcinoma. I'll point out that I really don't have a family history of cancer, and if I'm being honest, I don't always have the best track record of scheduling medical appointments. But for some reason, and for context, I turned 52 the week before that follow-up mammogram. I have been surprisingly diligent in getting mammograms, which ended up being a big deal for me. I am very grateful to a Woodbury radiologist who noticed something very small on my mammogram that wasn't there a year prior. After more tests and results, I got the scary news that too many of us have heard. I had surgery in early January 2016, a short course of radiation, and I'm on medical therapy moving forward. I was still able to do my job effectively here at the Capitol and represent my community, all without missing a vote. So given all this, I keep catching myself thinking and saying, I'm so lucky that it was detected early and my treatments were easy and my prognosis is good. I'm so lucky. But we all know that it is not luck. Luck is chance, an accident. This is no accident. This is the result of many efforts surrounding screening and early detection. Deliberate early detection is key. We had enough information to know we had caught my cancer very early, meaning I had a good prognosis. It also meant I had a range of treatment options available, which were, in the grand scheme of things, relatively minor. Today's proclamation will hopefully encourage more people to get screened and encourage us as policymakers to continue supporting measures that make screening and treatment accessible. At the Capitol, I will keep telling my story and fighting for state funding for the SAGE breast and cervical cancer screening program, which makes sure every Minnesotan has access to the mammogram she needs. But lawmakers need to hear from you, too. They need to hear your stories. They need to know cancer matters to you and that there's something good they can do to help. Governor Dayton, thank you for issuing this proclamation. And thank you all for continuing to look out for the needs of future cancer patients. And with that, I would like to introduce Veronica Bong.
Hi, my name is Veronica Bong. I'm a Mora resident, a teacher in 3rd grade, and a 2-year cancer survivor thanks to cancer screening. My journey with cancer began with a discussion with my doctor. I was of screening age, and I have an older sister who has been diagnosed with stage 1 colon cancer. Due to those 2 risk factors, my doctor suggested that I have a colonoscopy. My colonoscopy came back clear, and I breathed a sigh of relief. However, 3 years later, I began noticing some warning signs of cancer. I was aware of those warning signs due to the discussion I had had with my doctor earlier. My colonoscopy was repeated, and I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. After my diagnosis, my adult children talked to their doctors about our family history and their risks. They each had a colonoscopy, and 2 of them had precancerous polyps removed. My daughter was told by her doctor that had she waited until the screening age to have her colonoscopy, her polyps likely would have been cancerous. I'm sharing our story today because I want to make sure all Minnesotans know 3 very important things. Screenings save lives, including mine. 1 clear screening is not enough. Make sure you keep getting screened at the recommended times. Colonoscopies are easier than cancer. I should know, I've had both. Minnesotans use this week as an opportunity to talk to your doctor and your family about your cancer risks and make your appointments to get screened. You owe it to yourself and your family. Then, call a friend and encourage them to do the same. I want to thank Governor Dayton for focusing on cancer prevention and detection. Screening is incredibly important and certainly made a difference in my life and the lives of my children. Thank you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Laura Wilson, who will share a provider perspective on the importance of cancer screening.
Thank you, and thank you all for sharing your stories. Good morning. My name is Laura Wilson. I've been a physician assistant in family medicine at Apple Valley Medical Clinic for nearly 8 years. I went into medicine, primary care specifically, because I enjoy working with patients in all phases of their lives. I am their medical provider, but I do not make medical choices for them. I like to work with my patients, discuss their options for medical care, and make decisions together. That's why I make very clear the benefits of getting the right screening tests for my patients. Getting tests your provider recommends based on medical guidelines and your personal and family history of cancer leads to better health. The National Cancer Institute estimates that up to 1/3 of cancer deaths in the United States could be prevented by early cancer screenings. Screening tests exist for many types of cancer, including breast, colon, cervical, lung, skin, and prostate cancers. Your healthcare provider, people like me, can help you decide which tests you need and when you need them. Cervical cancer, for example, is treatable and preventable. Through Pap smears and HPV testing, we can find and detect precancerous cells before they turn into invasive cancers. Even better, getting vaccinated against HPV may allow us to significantly reduce, or dare we hope, wipe out this form of cancer entirely. Personally, I have seen consequences of not getting screened. My grandfather and my husband's grandmother both died from complications from colon cancer. Both saw signs of the disease, but chose not to get screened or tested. I do believe that their outcomes would have been significantly different had they gotten their colonoscopies. In the very least, they would have been able to make informed decisions about their health. Many patients come to see me having avoided clinics, hospitals, and medical providers for years. It usually starts with just being too busy to get in that appointment, or sometimes they feel guilty that it's been so long. I would like to set those fears to rest. Wherever you are in your medical history, your provider can get you caught up, so to speak. It really is that easy. Make the appointment, discuss your options, and make an informed decision. Some patients are so afraid of what they might find, they decide to avoid all testing. They have this idea that ignorance is bliss, or what I don't know can't hurt me. I'm here to tell you that when it comes to your health, this is absolutely not true. Screening tests for cancer give you knowledge, and this knowledge allows you to make the best choice for you and your families. Ignorance is not bliss, but knowledge is power. Please do what I recommend my patients do to reduce their risk for cancer. Stay away from tobacco products, maintain a healthy body weight for you, move your body, and eat well-balanced meals, and get the cancer screenings you need. Thank you for your time. Now I'm honored to turn it over to Governor Dayton.
Well, this is very personal for me. It's a year ago this month that I had my annual physical, and my internist looked at my PS count, and it was elevated up to 25, and so he right away put me in touch with a specialist and did an evaluation, and I had prostate cancer surgery 6 weeks later, and fortunately, up until this point, I'm cancer-free, and that early detection was just crucial in hopefully being able to capture and isolate the cancer in the prostate, remove the prostate, and before it could spread to other organs, which would have been a whole different prognosis and a whole different round of a much more invasive treatment. So I'm a believer. I know from firsthand experience that early detection is absolutely crucial. It's the difference between life and death. It's the difference between something you can move on and resume normal life and something that you're going to have to go through far greater ordeal in order to achieve that same outcome. I thank those who are here today to share their stories and to share that it is possible for anyone, everyone, to fight cancer and overcome it. And I want to thank all of you who are here who are working to alert Minnesotans to the need for early detection and also raising the funds so that someday we can eliminate this scourge from our society. So with that, it's my honor, Ellie, to ask you to come forward and to proclaim this week Cancer Screen Week throughout the state of Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good.
Thank you. I'll answer questions on this subject from all of you gathered in the press here.
Could someone explain a little bit more about why people don't get screened? I see that the numbers you provided are in the mid-70 range, and you did mention people are too busy, too guilty, but those really don't seem like good enough reasons, I guess. What about insurance? What about other things?
Sure, I could touch on that. Honestly, they might seem not like big reasons to you, but for many people they are. They don't want to come in, they don't have time to come in, they don't have childcare, transportation to come in. Insurance, I think, might play on their minds some, though it is good to know fully what your insurance will cover because almost all screenings are covered by insurance if you're in a certain age or guidelines. I think coming from a healthcare perspective, our insurance has a long way to go. But as far as cancer screenings, it usually is covered. But I don't know that this is widely known by the general population. So it's true that many, many cancers could be prevented if they would just go ahead and get those screenings done.
Can we speak to that?
Sure.
Good. Well, we represent prostate
Come
cancer.
here, please, so you can, they can get cameras and please come out. Use the microphone.
Good.
Thank you. Just introduce yourself for the record, please.
I'm Steve Rockline, and I've been living with prostate cancer for over 15 years now. So we certainly relate
I
to
guess
you,
so.
Governor Dayton.
Okay.
Yes, buddy. So, you know, that's a great question about testing. My colleague Dave and I work with men primarily because men have prostates, but we also work with the caregivers too. But men are notorious for not wanting to go to the doctor. We know that about men. Oh, honey, I feel fine. I don't need to go. I don't need to go. So you caregivers out there, be they men or women, it's really important that you encourage your men to go, because a lot of them, like we heard in the stories today, there aren't any real symptoms of prostate cancer. It takes a while for it to catch up to you. So it's very important that when it comes to men, that we are very much encourage them to get their PSA test starting at 40 or 45. But I can tell you, being a man, that we resist generally. So you caregivers push those guys to get out there and get their tests.
Very good.
Thanks.
Thank you. Very well. Well said. Other questions?
What about
It
screening?
says, give the press a chance first, if it's okay. Okay.
What about screening for younger people? I'm 35 and I diagnosed with stage 3B colon cancer. My chances of survival are just 38% post HIPEC surgery, and screening wasn't available, wasn't suggested by my doctor. So what can we do to help young people?
You know, the screening guidelines are made to catch as many as we can. In medicine, we're constantly trying to figure out the benefits versus the risk and what that ratio is. Thank you for sharing your personal story, and I really hope you're in that 30%. We take into account family history, your health habits. If you do have a family history of colon cancer, like one of our survivors spoke to, it is usually recommended to get that screening done. I can't speak with complete accuracy, but I believe it's 5 years younger than the family member, 10 years younger than the family member that you had. Yep, the first precancerous lesion that was found on their colonoscopy. Some people have no family history of any sort of cancer and will still get this. That's unfortunately the science behind cancer. But that is one of the things when I was mentioning that insurance doesn't necessarily cover 100% of screenings. You would probably be in that category where we would have to fight a little bit stronger for you to get the screenings done.
I'm sorry too for your situation. I pray for your recovery. Any other questions? Yes.
My name is Tim Anderson. I'm with Cancer Detecting Clothing, and I'm a friend of Sasha. One of the main reasons we believe that she has colon cancer is the 3M dumping in Oakdale. So she's been drinking polluted water for 12 years, which is what gave her an abnormally early stage of cancer. How would you handle screening in a cancer cluster? There's a specific area where there's a pollution or environmental factor that's causing a lot of people to get cancer. How would an insurance company, the state, handle it? And the state is also suing 3M for $5 billion on this issue. So how does she get involved with the settlement if you guys get it?
Well, as you say, the Attorney General's filed a lawsuit, and that's an active suit. Put term liability there, and so the settlement would be premature until that decision has been made by the courts. But in terms of what do you do in areas of higher risk cancer because of environmental factors?
That would absolutely change some of the screening guidelines. It would definitely change some of the screening guidelines. If you had, and generally we use family history as one of the most common things that we talk about, what changes your screening guidelines if you have a strong family history of one sort of cancer or the other. But there are other things that come into play. Obviously with lung cancer, we think about if you have a history of smoking. With colorectal cancer, also smoking comes into play because that goes through your system. There are other, with cervical cancer, if you have a history of human papillomavirus, that will increase your risk and the frequency in which we recommend pap smears. So There are general guidelines, and then there are ones that are more specific to the patient, which is just, again, another reason why you should have that open and candid conversation with your medical provider.
Governor, one of the reasons that men might, it's over here, it's Kevin.
Thank you.
One of the reasons that men might be fraidy cats about it, and it's not just being afraid to undergo the test, but actually being afraid of the experience and the treatment and everything like that. And you've experienced that. Is there anything you can tell men about that, your experience, and how difficult it was, how long it took you to regain your strength, how normal you feel now in the wake of all that?
Well, I've had a couple of colonoscopies, and they're not fun, but they're not. Someone said very well, they're certainly better than the treatment if cancer develops. I had no indication physically that I had prostate cancer. I mean, I didn't notice any change in my physical well-being, so it was totally a result of the early detection that I was able to have the surgery, and I can't say it was pleasant, wasn't pleasant, but again, considering that I was able to recover and knock on wood, still cancer-free, and considering that if it hadn't been caught before it spread to other organs, I'd be looking at chemotherapy or radiation or both or more. I mean, the contrast in the difference that the early detection made was just huge. And I just can't emphasize enough how imperative it is, without any symptoms or warnings, that men, at least as far as prostate cancer, and men and women have regular checkups and screening procedures for whatever they might be at risk for, because it'll save their lives.
Can I jump in on that?
Yeah,
one as
please
well?
do.
Thank you, Governor. Since my diagnosis and my treatment, because I did have really a relatively easy treatment as a result of the early detection. I had many, many more options. So I had easy surgery, I had short radiation. I will be honest and say, when I first got this diagnosis, I couldn't help but think, oh my gosh, am I going to lose my hair during an election year? That didn't happen. But that's one of the reasons that I have really made it a mission now to talk about why early screening is so important, because not only does it help your prognosis, which as the mother of a relatively young son, that's very important to me, but it really does give you so many options that can be far less scary than some of the ones we might have heard about. So human nature is human nature. And people will delay and put off and avoid for all sorts of reasons. But that's why I think this opportunity to speak about the importance of screening and early detection is so valuable, because we can help people realize it doesn't have to be as scary as you might think it is.
Senator, you mentioned the expansion of screening programs in Minnesota. What groups don't have access to this? And would you like to see have access to it? And I guess I'd like to ask that question of Governor Dayton in light of our budget forecast. It's coming out soon too, but what his thoughts are on that.
Well, I will just briefly say that we've seen remarkable success in getting more people access to insurance, which is hugely important to making sure that they have access to these treatments. And as I mentioned, the SAGE treatment is one that is available for people who don't have insurance and access to have that covered. But we need to keep doing better at that, because it's just too important.
Well, thanks to the Affordable Care Act, there are only 4% of Minnesotans now that do not have health insurance, and I believe that thanks again to the Affordable Care Act, is setting up the parameters of what has to be covered in an insurance policy, which some people want to undo. Because of that, I think Laura tests better than I the actual particulars, but screening should be available as part of those policies for the 96% of Minnesotans who have health insurance, and if it's not covered, they should contact my office, and we'll go to work with you to get it rectified. Yeah.
My name is Dave Holder with the Minnesota Prostate Cancer Coalition, and obviously another brother here has had prostate cancer. So one of the things that men need to realize is that if you have prostate cancer, 60 to 70% of the patients that are initially diagnosed have active surveillance. And those numbers have actually gone up. So why would you be, and that means you don't have to go into treatment immediately. But there's cases like myself who have the aggressive version, which has to be treated. And I'm a 9-year survivor. So it's about getting men into the doctors and making sure they understand what their issues are. So they should start to get the prostate health exams from their doctors at earlier ages, 40s and 50s and things like that, especially if they got families, that they got grandfathers, fathers, uncles, other men. So guys should not be scared by prostate cancer. And there is robotic surgeries. Like in this case, I'm sure you did a robotic. There is procedures out there that aren't as invasive like they used to have. So don't be scared by it. So that's my, and I have a t-shirt for you.
All right.
Do you want one?
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Those of you who are new to this endeavor, we now move on to let the press ask questions on every other subject. So most people choose to get out of their association with me at this point, but I want to thank you all very, very much, and have a great week. So now I'm going to limit it to the press. You have to show your ID before you can ask questions. But you're welcome to stay and watch the
Governor, there is a fifth and possibly a sixth accuser of Senator Al Franken for sexual harassment. Do you believe he should resign?
I'm not going to say any more than I've said repeatedly now, and I can get you the quote, but it's going to the Ethics Committee of the Senate, and I believe we should withhold any judgments until that investigation has been complete.
Governor, in the last 10 years, the Senate Ethics Committee has had 676 complaints, 0 discipline, 0 findings against any member of the Senate.
Well, they censured Senator Sternberger.
That was 20 years ago, 25 years ago, yes.
They recommended expulsion of the Nevada Senator and John Ensign, and he resigned before they could come before the Senate. I don't have all the background facts, but anyway, I stand by my statement. I'm not going to go beyond that. I also wanted to just interject that at this point I received a letter of resignation from Representative Tony Cornish. Been told that we'll receive one, have not yet, in writing from Senator Schoen. And I can't proceed with the special election, at least for the Senate seat, until that letter has been received. We were told it was going to come end of last week, or told it's going to come today. When that occurs, when I receive that letter, I will formally call for special elections for those 2 seats on Monday, February 12th, 2018, with a special primary, and then on Monday, January 29th, 2018, and the candidate filing period is Monday, January 8th through Thursday, January 11th of 2018. Monday is an unusual day for an election in Minnesota. Unfortunately, there's a provision in the Minnesota statute very clear that if there's a special local election in one of the areas affected by the state election, that it cannot be held on the same day. So we had planned to hold it on Tuesday, February 13th, but there's one corner of Representative Cornish's district which has a special school board election on the 13th. So by statute, we could not have the election on that day. And the previous Tuesday, February 6th, is precinct caucus day and night in Minnesota, and given are likely to be a very intense and competitive caucus endorsing convention contest in both DFL and Republican parties, was generally agreed that that was not a desirable date. Going forward from that, January 30th, then you get into a filing period and the like that just overlaps with the holidays. So it's not desirable to have the elections, the primary and the general on a Monday, but under state law and given the other circumstances, we really didn't have any other choice. If you want more details on that, we can provide those to you later.
Governor, as it relates to the sexual harassment inquiry that your administration is doing on policies and practices and instances, should the number of settlements, if there were any, be made public as part of that? And also, should the legislature be bound to release information about whatever settlements it made over the course of how many years?
I'm sorry, I'm not clear on your question as it relates to the executive branch.
Your administration is undergoing a review of sexual harassment policies and occurrences. If there are any settlements that were made by agencies, should those be made public?
I don't know, understand. In principle, I would say yes, and under Minnesota existing law, I can't say I don't know what's public and what's non-public information.
And what about the legislature?
The legislature's only bound by itself. The legislature's going to have to come up with its own procedures and assurances, protections, and consequences. And they should do so, definitely, as we should in the executive branch.
Governor, there's been a call for a sexual harassment task force. There's been a call for a wider investigation into what has already happened. There's also been a call for the creation of an office, perhaps something akin to the legislative audit or something like that, to look into these issues so that there can be both a place for lobbyists to lodge their complaints and some form of, fair justice for the accuser. On that latter point, is that something that, in principle, you think you might support? Could you see the creation of that kind of an investigative
I set up a task force with 6 or 7 of my own senior commissioners to look at the whole array of options or issues that you just raised and others too, and look at how we can better design on the executive branch for reporting, for protection, for consequences, for enforcement. I don't have that authority with the legislative branch. I don't think my recommendations right now are likely to have a desired effect on the legislative branch. So I have to defer to them to make their own determinations, and that's an appropriate question for Speaker Dowd and Senate Majority Leader Gazelka to see how they intend to proceed. But in principle, I would agree, totally agree. And I think we can probably include lobbyists as part of the executive branch. Whatever we come forward should include them and other people who are involved here at the Capitol for whatever reasons.
I want to make sure you're talking about the possible creation of that kind of an office, if you could envision.
I'm not going to prejudge what they're going to say, but one of the questions is, should it be centralized? And should there be a uniform reporting procedure and a set of consequences that applies to all state agencies, all state employees? And I think I can't say definitively whether we need legislation or not, but I think we could extend that to include lobbyists and members of the press, other people who are in here at the Capitol. But I have to verify that authority.
Other questions? Governor, how shaky do you think tomorrow's forecast will be, given so much is riding on this tax measure that is not yet final in Washington?
Well, I think whatever it is tomorrow, the definitive word will be the one beginning of March. And I don't tend to issue a supplemental budget, if there's going to be one, until after that beginning of March forecast, because you're right, this is going to be speculative at best, and it's not going to factor in any of the provisions which nobody knows about, including members who voted for it. So until we've got a definitive word, until the next round, the panel of experts can factor those changes in, will not. I'm not going to rely on it for any final decisions.
With respect to the article in late November where it seemed that you were backing off of your vetoes, it sort of sounded like you might be rescinding them, but that wasn't clear. How should we read what you're suggesting there? Are you going to actually rescind formally those vetoes? Or are you just inviting lawmakers back in February, pass their bill, and you'll cooperate at a higher level? How should they read that?
I'm not rescinding the vetoes. They're constitutional according to the Supreme Court. The legislature took it all the way to the Supreme Court, claiming that they were unconstitutional, and they were proven wrong. I don't even know if I could statutorily rescind them absent a special session, but I have no intention of doing so, so I haven't even looked into that possibility.
So is that what you're telling them, is you're just trying to work with them?
Well, what I was meant to say was, and it was reported accurately what I said, but the context for it is that the Supreme Court ruled, as Commissioner Franz and I had asserted for months, that the legislature has enough money to operate according to its own projected budget until it reconvenes next February. So there was never any need, as it turned out, for them to go to court and push all this through. They claimed I was going to abolish the legislature and they weren't going to be able to operate. The massive layoffs. Totally untrue. Totally untrue. And they kept, right until the very end, even now perhaps, but right until the Supreme Court's ruling, claiming that, that I was trying to abolish them, that they were going to not be able to function. I don't have any leverage to get them to come back to the bargaining table without those line item vetoes, without them having some effect. So the reality is that they're not going to come back, and they don't need to come back in order to achieve what they want to achieve, which is get funding for their operations and come back at the beginning of February. I'm not going to protract this. I'm not going to ask legislators to vote against funding for their own institutions. So, you know, but all of this and the expenses, we've been asked what the expense is for these, this litigation. We provided accurately and up-to-date information at a continuous basis. Also, at the end of last week, to a request for the cost to the executive, to our office. I'm told the legislature was unwilling to provide a total of their legislative legal expenses until the lawsuit was over. Well, the lawsuit's over, so they're overdue to provide their accounting. And, you know, you can total those two numbers up. They're going to be several $100,000 that were unnecessarily incurred on the taxpayers of Minnesota, because if they knew what they had in available funds in July, which they should have known, they have a competent accounting system, they should have known that they had the money. They didn't need to go through a lawsuit. They didn't need to go through any of this. And I think it's worthwhile that they did, because it established the constitutionality for future governors and legislatures of what transpired. But anyway, that's it.
How much were yours?
What's total?
Yeah, about 368,000.
About 368,000. We'll give you the exact number.
That was paid from what account?
That was paid from MMB and the governor's office. We're the co-defendants.
Governor,
Is that right?
Governor, it's a fair bet that one of the first things the legislature will do on the 20th of February is to pass a bill refunding themselves. The leaders, both Speaker Dowd and Majority Leader Gazalka, said they will not have any, that's all the bill will do, clean in their terms. Bill arrives on your desk, will you sign it?
Well, it's a clean bill. I either sign it or if I don't sign it, it takes long, 3 days. I won't veto it. I want to put this matter behind us, and we have a big agenda for the legislative session, as the legislature does, and I want to work constructively together to achieve what we can, working together for the people of Minnesota.
Is that the said, sir, that you would not sign the bill?
If it is a clean bill, I'd sign it. If it's a clean bill and it restores their funding to the level that was line item vetoed, then I would sign it.
Is that the limit of the message you were imparting then when you talked to the SRIB in November? That you said it was pretty clear that you weren't going to stand in the way of them being funded. But I'm confused about the message beyond that you're imparting with that.
What's the confusion?
Well, you're not presenting that's clear. It's not sure you can do that. But then you just started talking about the way the House and the Senate behaved in their pursuit of the lawsuit. But I'm not sure what message you're trying to impart to the state and to the legislature in terms of what your message to the SRIB was. You're backing away from the vetoes, but what is that?
Backing away from the vetoes. I made the vetoes. I went to the Supreme Court to uphold the constitutionality of the vetoes. I made the vetoes. The vetoes are in effect, but I can't use those as leverage to force the legislative leaders to come back and renegotiate those items to get funding when they don't need the funding.
Okay.
Can you say a few words about the appointment of Sophia Vuelo to be a judge?
I'm sorry, say again?
Can you say a few words about Sophia Luella to be a judge?
Very proud moment for me, very proud moment for the judiciary, the first among American to be appointed to the Minnesota judiciary, and we're told the second in the nation. Very, very well qualified, came very highly recommended. I think she'll be an outstanding judge, and that's the reason that I appointed her. But I'm very honored to be a governor to appoint the first among American to the Minnesota court.
Any thoughts about the opioid suit that the county attorneys have filed? And are you supportive of that? Is that going to be cross-pollination with what you're doing within your...
Part will bring the legislature, yes. The Lieutenant Governor had a press conference last Friday. I mean, we need to attack this as aggressively as we can, every which way. We need to get the companies on board with the penny uphill so that we can have the funding to attack this at all levels. But it's everything and more.
Governor, how does your wish list for your last legislative session change given, both the uncertainty at the federal level and, some pretty damaged relationships with the legislature?
Well, I can't speak to the former in complete terms because I don't know what, I still don't know what all that's actually in the bill, and of course it's going to go to conference committee. So let me hold that one off until after we know what the final bill is going to be, although it certainly has effects on Minnesota, which I've outlined before, and other groups, higher education and others have outlined the effects it could have. And obviously, if they do something to the Affordable Care Act, it's going to have serious effects. In terms of the legislature, I'm coming forward with my agenda, the same agenda that I would if there were other circumstances. That's what I believe is right for Minnesota. They'll have their agenda, what they believe is right for Minnesota. We'll disagree, which is to be expected, given different political parties. And those will be heightened because it's an election year. So everything will be political and everything will be not just members of the legislature, but every other candidate out there, using every opportunity to make their case and appeal to their delegates and primary voters, et cetera. And so it's going to be a very noisy and I think very contentious session. And I think, as I say, it would be under any circumstances. And my message to Speaker Dowd, who I've invited to lunch, and Senator Kozolko, who I've invited separately to lunch, is to say we got to put all that aside. We each got elected with a job to do. It's to represent the best interests of Minnesota. We'll have our honest disagreements about what that is. That's to be expected. But I'm prepared to roll up my sleeves and work constructively with every member of the legislature, and I trust that they'll be able to do the same with me. Okay? Thank you.